Today's story is about a real encounter this person had that claims to be 100% true. I came across someone's personal encounter that they told, and I just felt the need to share this one with y'all. This story will go against what the modern world tells us to believe and will make you really think to what this thing or creature was. We will be digging into a story within a story about a case that is said to be a true encounter with what they call a werewolf or possibly a skinwalker. But I will let you be the judge of that. Hi, I'm Zach and welcome to Rooted Expeditions. If you're a fan of the abandoned, historical, and strange events, then you are in the right place. Hit that thumbs up and let's get started in today's strange event. Now, before we get started, let's first start off with a little background of this man, which for the story we will call him Chris. Chris started to work for this church group that was doing work on a Navajo reservation site, helping the community by working on people's homes, such as doing roof repairs, painting, and some interior work. They would start work around 8 a.m. and then they would finish up about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. It was good pay and the people that he was around seemed to be really nice, and it made him happy to be there and to be able to be a part of this community and help them. Over the past 2 months working for this church group, Chris had gotten pretty close to some of the residents on this reservation. There was this one woman, and for this story we will call her Maria, and Chris got to know Maria really well. And to Chris, she was a superstitious woman. She would always tell him never be outside at night, and she would say other things that he really didn't quite understand. But early on, he was told by his superiors who worked for this church group that the Navajo people believed in many supernatural things, and one of those things was this creature that was known as a skinwalker, or as to some, they would call it a werewolf. So Chris would be aware of this and he would respect them for their beliefs and would not bring it up to them as he didn't want to offend anyone. But one day, as Chris was working on Maria's house, who he was getting to know really well, he was painting different sections of her house, and his curiosity started to stir within him about their belief in this werewolves or skinwalkers. So when Chris finished the painting that needed to be done at this woman's house, he went on lunch. So he would sit on the front porch of Maria's home and start to eat his lunch. As he was eating, Maria came outside and sat right next to him, and they would strike up a conversation and they would end up talking for a while. And as Chris was starting to feel more comfortable around her, he built up enough courage to finally ask her about these werewolves or other supernatural beliefs that they had. Now, after Chris asking this question, he didn't think he would get a response back about this. And on top of that, he was kind of scared that he might have offended her by even asking such a question. But to his surprise, she turns her head away, looking towards the open land, and with a long hesitation, she says, "Yes, I know some, and I have experienced it too." In a state of shock that she even responded, he was very interested to hear what she had to say, and she would start to describe this werewolf or creature. And she would tell him and say, werewolves look like normal people, but masked in white paint, covering their face, arms, and chest, their whole body as a white as a corpse, covered with black symbols, quite possibly related to devil worshipping. More specifically, they are grave diggers and necromancers, and as well as they dig up bodies up only to just steal their jewelry. Werewolves get their power from the devil. That is how they are able to possess such supernatural strength and endurance. Chris, just hearing this, was surprised to hear such a story coming from this woman. He thought that these werewolves looked something from how they show them on TV. But before he could ask more questions about this, Maria began to tell him more about her own interactions with these supernatural beasts. This next story that she would end up telling Chris would leave chills down his spine. Maria explained that one night her and her husband were driving on this curvy road alongside the mountains, and as they were driving, they saw what looked like this woman kneeling in the middle of the road up ahead. She had her face covered by her hands, and it looked like she was crying or that maybe something was wrong. Then, as Maria and her husband were getting closer to this woman who was in the middle of the road, the woman looks up towards the headlights coming right at her to reveal the very same white paint and sacrificial symbols mentioned previously. Her husband honked the horn and quickly slams on the brakes so he would not hit this woman or thing, but it was too late, and you could hear this loud cracking sound of the woman's bones and the splash of blood all over the windshield in the car as they hit this woman or creature. As soon as this happened, they quickly stopped the car and looked at each other, trying to figure out what the heck just happened. They quickly get out of the car and both run to where they think they hit this woman, but once they reached this spot, there was no body. And on top of that, and what was really strange, there was no blood. And when they got back to their car to check the car, there wasn't any blood there either, as it just vanished. Now, just to explain, this part of the reservation they were driving on had some cliffs, but other than that, it was fairly flat land. In this section where Maria and her husband were driving, you would have been able to notice if there was a body or whatever they hit was there. It just wouldn't have vanished. In shock to what just happened, Maria and her husband drove back home trying to find an excuse to what they could have experienced or what happened. And they tried to deny the fact that it could have been a ghost or even a werewolf. And at this time in Maria's life, she wasn't too much into the supernatural, so they both just chalked it up as they were just losing their minds for that night. This story got Chris really thinking, was her story about this werewolf true, or was this her way of describing a skinwalker or some other supernatural phenomenon because she didn't think he would understand what a skinwalker was? So after they wrapped up their conversation, Chris would head to his next task for the church. So they would wrap up their conversation after he had his lunch and he would go on his way. That whole day and, well, the next few days, Chris would keep thinking about these stories that Maria talked about. And even at night, he had a hard time getting to be comfortable to go to sleep because he just constantly kept on thinking about these stories and just having his mind playing tricks on him. Chris would become mentally drained and was worrying so much about these encounters that he almost would start feeling paranoid. After a long week since talking to Maria, one evening around 6 p.m., Chris and his friend were driving back to the church site where their cabin was. And at this point, Chris was so drained and just physically and mentally tired. And he was in a state of half awake and half asleep. And he was just ready to lay down and just go to sleep and try to forget this thing. So as his friend was driving, they came up to this gas station that was near the church. And his friend told him that he needed to go inside this gas station and grab a few snacks and drinks so that he could have at their cabin. So Chris said, okay, that's fine. And he laid his face down against the window of the vehicle and tried to doze off while waiting for his friend to get what he needed at the gas station and come back so that they can go to the cabin. As Chris was trying to fall asleep, he had this strange and weird feeling that he was being watched. So he opened his eyes and looked out the window of the vehicle, but he didn't see anything. And when he turned his head, he could see something out of the corner of his eye. And he quickly turned his head to look to see what he saw, but again, there was nothing there. And what he saw, he could describe it to almost what Maria saw when she was telling her story. At this point, it was starting to get dark outside, so Chris, being on alert, sat up in his seat, rubbed his eyes to shake off the drowsiness, and he looked out the window again to see if he could see what he saw at the corner of his eye, but he couldn't see anything. So he decided, okay, I'm going to go outside. So he opened the door of the vehicle and he stepped outside to see if he can get a better look. And as Chris was looking around outside, his friend comes out of the gas station and says, "Hey, what the heck are you doing?" And at this point, Chris was thinking whether or not he should tell his friend of what just happened, but instead he just replied back saying, "Oh, yeah, I'm just getting some fresh air. Let's head out of here." So what did Chris see that evening when he was in the car? Was it a werewolf, a skinwalker, or something supernatural? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Here's a little bit of history for you. Hit that thumbs up. Peace, I love you, and as always, God bless.